Welcome back, Multi Battle Conference. We are back with our final draft analysis for the beginning of Season 5. Getting a couple of these up a little bit late, but that's okay.
They're getting finished.
These last few that we've uploaded, at least we're getting them up before those teams play their
Yeah.
games. So
Scheduling issues with this one too, so
yeah, there's and God, we 18 of these videos in a little over a week has been it's been a little rough. But this is our last one. We're gonna be doing a draft analysis for the Dark Web Porygons. So they started off their draft. Their first pick was the Kanto Zapdos, followed by the beginning of their Rain mode in Politoed. Then they took their other A tier in Garchomp, their Swift Swim Sweeper in Barraskewda, Redirection and Lightning Rod with Pikachu. Then they got the Scizor, the Sylveon, Delmise, Duskull, and Raboot. First impressions of this team?
I think they wanted to try. All right, I'm gonna go on a limb here. Think they were going for like a rain mode.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, I'm just saying.
That seems like
I'm
a bit
not
of a leap.
sure. It's a little. I mean, yeah. In all seriousness, very clearly they went for a rain type team. A lot of things here benefit from the rain. You have the Scizor, you have the Delmise. Pikachu obviously does a decent amount of things by being able to provide Lightning Rod support for some of these other water types. Obviously, you have the Swift Swim Sweeper and Barraskewda. We're going to be saying that a lot. Swift Swim Sweeper. Swift Swim Sweeper.
Rain Sweeper. That's a little
No,
bit better.
no, it's too easy. So there's a few things that you have here. Obviously, you have the Dragon Steel Fairy Core with the Sylveon, Scizor, Garchomp. But I don't know. Sometimes too much of a good thing is bad, and I think I don't want to say this draft is bad, but I think a little bit too much in one direction this draft might have went.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing about draft league is that you can you see which 10 mons your opponent has, so you can prep exactly specifically for that. So if you're too reliant on one particular mode, it's not typically a great place to be. I mean, just to use an example from season 2, we went up against a team called Tapu Wooloo, which had a very hard Trick Room mode. I think or Trick Room team. Their whole draft basically was Trick Room, except for
Their fastest Pokemon was Tapu Bulu.
yeah, they did have a Excelgor, but that was just kind of an outlier to kind of mess with your opponent's heads a little bit to see what what you might lead. But yeah, aside from that, their fastest Pokemon was Tapu Bulu, and we just prepped really hard for Trick Room because that's the kind of draft that they had. We used Iron Ball Aromatisse because it undersped their Stack Attacka by 1 point, and then they kind of seemed surprised and a little distraught when.
Yeah.
When we did that, and it's like, well, we hard prepped for like the one thing that your team does. So if I think this isn't quite as hard of rain team as that was a hard Trick Room team, but yeah, I can definitely see if you prep hard for rain and you have a good stop to it, it's gonna be a little bit rough for the Porygons.
You'll see some Sunny Day Liepard, stuff like that. Halucha got drafted. That gets some weather stuff, I believe, right? Does it get Sunny Day?
Not sure, but Drifblim does.
Yeah, Drifblim. Yeah, so it's going to be one of those situations where you're going to go, wow, you ran Sunny Day on that? Yes.
Like, of course we
Yes,
did.
we did. You're very, very clearly going for rain here.
You traded for Kanto Ninetales right before your game with us?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course we did.
Yeah, we did. Getting rid of it right after. Too.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, those are kind of just our first impressions. We're gonna move on to the grades here. So for drafting, we gave these guys a C. So I think the Kanto Zapdos is a decent pick for the first pick. The Porygons were pretty late in the draft order. So I think it makes sense that they got what I consider to be a more mediocre Pokemon, at least for an S tier. It's definitely good. I mean, it gets Hurricane now, and it gets Tailwind by transfer, and you can, it's Zapdos has always been a powerful Pokemon in both in draft and VGC. I think it's okay. I think maybe they might have, if I were in their position, I might have dipped into the A tier first, kind of the way we did last season. Zapdos is, as far as S tiers go, it's okay. It's not bad. But yeah, they went immediately into the Politoed, which I think was the first pick that I would qualify as an actual mistake. I don't. We were not really convinced that going for rain early here was really the play, especially because it looks like filling out their draft with a bunch of stuff that wants to be in rain is clearly what they wanted to do. And if that's the direction you're going, then great. At least you got your Drizzlemon. But it's typically better to go for something a little bit more versatile, a little more adaptable, something that you can put pair with a lot of different stuff in the beginning, so that you're not pigeonholed into doing this for the rest of the draft. I would have I do like the Zapdos Garchomp combination a lot, but I would have really liked to see Garchomp here as the second pick instead of the Politoed. Typically, a Drizzle Pokemon is something you can get later in the draft when you see that a lot of other teams. You start with something adaptable, something that can fit with a lot of other modes, and a lot of other Pokemon, like the Zapdos Garchomp. That would qualify for that. And then I think once you see other teams start to fill out their draft, and you see that nobody is really going for some kind of a weather team or a rain team specifically, then typically it's a better idea to save those high tier picks, those A tier picks especially, for later in the draft, so you can dip into the lower tiers before most other teams do. I think that's typically what you want to do if you're going to put a weather option on your team, especially if your rain sweeper is Barraskewda. We also agreed that we think they should have gone for their rain sweeper first, whether it was Barraskewda or Kingdra or Ludicolo, whatever they wanted. But I think it's especially important to do that with Barraskewda first and go back to the Drizzle Pokemon later, especially because Barraskewda, even more so than your A tier Swift Swim Pokemon like the Ludicolo and Kingdra, is able to function more outside of rain, whereas the other two, they really need rain to get going. Otherwise, their speed stats are just very lackluster. And not to mention, there's two Drizzle Pokemon on the board, both of which I think are decent. Pelipper obviously is kind of lacking in its stats, and but I think it's okay. I think it has a deeper move pool than most people give it credit for, and Tailwind on your Drizzle Pokemon is incredibly good.
It's U-turn too, so
Right, yeah. I think people sleep on Pelipper a little bit in comparison to Politoed, because Politoed's just traditionally been the best one. But I think taking Pelipper is a totally legitimate move as well, especially if you happen to get sniped on the Politoed.
Well, they didn't even need to. I don't think they needed to, but one of the key things is that they obviously had no problem going for an A tier late with the Sylveon, right?
Right, yeah.
So, like, if you switch those, I'm not saying that you pick the Sylveon in the second slot, but maybe go for something like the Raichu in that slot, because I believe they might have had a chance for that because they were towards the end of the draft, so I might have came back to that.
Yeah.
In the second.
I mean, Raichu would have been a little bit weird because with
the Zapdos.
We're weird about the Pikachu pick too.
Already, but like, especially in the second round, you go Zapdos, then Raichu. That doesn't make sense. But you're right. But like a good follow-up user that might be a more high value, and then then after that maybe go for your Barraskewda, and then wait all the way till the 7th or 8th round to pick up your weather setter, because I think like you had mentioned, we were talking about that. The Swift Swim Sweeper is more important than anything else, and you should be more than content if you had to go with your second choice in Pelipper. And if Politoed gets picked up and you start noticing that other weather setters are getting taken, then obviously make that move to try and pick up your second option right away. But as we found out at the end of the draft, and maybe this is just hindsight, literally this is the only weather team in the draft out of 18 teams.
Right. So
they really didn't have to prioritize the Politoed so high.
And even then, I would probably put the Drizzle Pokemon and your Swift Swim Pokemon down both down low, so that You can you can dip into those lower tiers before most other teams do, and get some Pokemon that could work with that rain mode that you have your eye on. And then if the stuff that if the rain Pokemon you want actually do happen to get sniped, then you at least you have some good stuff that's more splashable on other kinds of team compositions. I think that's generally the best way to go with weather. Picking your weather Pokemon immediately is it seems suboptimal draft wise, and then it also it kind of it seemed to pigeonhole these guys into drafting like almost a full rain team. So, which we've mentioned is not great at draft. Also, the Pikachu pick is something we're kind of skeptical of. It's a little bit weird that you have a redirector here that has Lightning Rod next to your only S tier is Zapdos, which is you can do discharge stuff, but like
Could do that with Electivire.
Right, that too. Yeah, we think that Electivire or Electabuzz would have been a much better choice for this slot, and just going for something else as your C tier pick if you want, or turning that into a B tier pick again and just going with 2 E tiers down at the bottom because Duskull and Raboot aren't really doing anything. Duskull maybe, but meh.
Electivire would have been so good there.
Yeah, and it was still both Electabuzz and Electabuzz is still on the board, yeah. And Electivire was it got taken pretty late. I think the Mats took it like round 7 or 8, so it was definitely still on the board in round 5. And it's just a little bit weird to have a Lightning Rod Pokemon on the same team as where your only S tier is an Electric type, and you could. I mean, You can put the Pikachu and the Zapdos on the same side to avoid that Lightning Rod problem, but then you can't have redirection next to your S tier. You can't really. It's a lot harder to max the Zapdos if you with redirection next to it when Pikachu's your only redirector, or you just have to go with the static on Pikachu so you can actually use a Thunder or a Max Lightning from the Zapdos. Which is less than ideal. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be a big deal if your opponent doesn't really have much good electrics coverage, but yeah, it's just a weird bit of anti-synergy there that you could have avoided if you had just picked a different and frankly better electric type redirector for not that much more in terms of cost. And then after I think the rest of the draft sort of suffered a little bit because they went with rain so high. I like the Scizor and Sylveon with the Garchomp. It's a decent core. I don't think they're all perfect together, but I think they're going to work decently well together. But they kind of missed 2 big things here. Partially because they went with rain up top, but I think they could have covered for these still later on in the draft. They don't really have much of a fire, water, grass core. I'm not really giving much credit to Raboot here. Yeah. It's not a very good mon. It's in D tier for a reason. It's really only gonna be decent if you Dynamax it because it's like Cinderace stuff like Bounce. I think Raboot gets Bounce. You really want to get the max move there instead of just the regular move. And if you're maxing Raboot, well, I mean you're maxing a D tier, and that's probably suboptimal. I'm not really convinced that it's going to be all that great. And then so you're kind of missing that fire type element of your fire, water, grass core. You do have Barraskewda and Dhelmise, which are also a little bit weird because they're so different. They like we've said in a bunch of these videos, you kind of want there to be a decent balance between speed, offense, and defense in these type cores as much as you want, or as much as you can get. And there's really we're not seeing that here between the Barraskewda and Dhelmise. Dhelmise is a bulky Trick Room mon, and Barraskewda is a super fast glass cannon. So it's going to be a little bit weird, I think, having them together. They can still do some good stuff, but it's going to be hard for the Delmise to really cover for the Barrascuda out of Trick Room, or the Barrascuda to cover for the Delmise in Trick Room. So, and then their Trick Room mode also kind of suffered. They didn't really get a good Trick Room setter. All they have is the Duskull, which maybe it's bulkier than I'm giving it credit for, but I kind of doubt it. It's still it doesn't even have a slower speed stat than Dusclops. It's
20 HP.
Yeah, the HP stat is really yeah, it's not great.
You put Eviolite on that all day.
Of course, yeah. Like
but
it can be
20
okay,
HP.
but yeah. Dusclops is I don't know, something like 30 or 40 HP.
I think it's 40
with like 130, I think,
Yeah.
on the defenses. So like this is okay, but it's really not great. I think they're gonna struggle against opposing Trick Room. For sure, and they don't really have a fully fleshed out Trick Room mode of their own. The Scizor and Sylveon could function in Trick Room against some faster teams that don't really have a good Trick Room matchup, but yeah, it's the Trick Room mode here and the Firewater Grass Core definitely suffered. So, yeah, I mean there are some good decisions here. I do like the Fairy Dragon Steel Core. Getting at least they knew what they wanted, getting Rain early. At least they drafted other stuff that works well with Rain. But yeah, as far as the drafting process goes, I'm not really convinced that this was the way to go. So we gave him a C on that.
For Synergy, we gave them a B. There's obviously a lot of all this stuff works for the most part. I mean, we're not going to go ahead and say that they just drafted a bunch of Pokemon that didn't work together. Obviously, Zapdos Garchomp is a core or a pair that we've seen in VGC before. If you played in the early days, Disquake stuff is a very real threat. Barrascuda and Politoed obviously work well with the Swift Swim and the being able to set up Brain. Pikachu's able to use Lightning Rod to protect these water types, these more frail water types. And Politoed's not super frail, but Barrascuda sure is. Obviously, Scizor having the ×4 weakness to fire is going to benefit from that Rain a lot too. So, yeah, Delmise as well. So all this stuff does work. It's just I wish that I feel that this is kind of one of those things where they don't get how underwhelming Rain can be. 5 turns isn't a lot, and you don't have as much pivoting ability that you do in VGC. Probably the best weather team that we've seen was Ben and Vichy's last season that they made it to top 4 with, where they had the G-Max Venusaur and the Kanto Ninetales, and it was just kind of there, but like all their other stuff was so solid that we had to make sure that we also had answers for that.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot more versatility there because
Yeah.
it wasn't just a Sun team. They had they had Inteleon, they had the Urshifu, they had Gengar, they had other non-Sun related threats.
Yeah. And the problem is that we feel with this team is that this is all rain. And if this was like a VGC team and you wanted to make Pelipper, Ludicolo, Ferrothorn, however you want to make it Thunderous or Tornadus, something like that, then yeah, that stuff like that will work. But in Draft League, the problem is that we see what you can run every single week, and one look at a team like this is you stop the rain mode and you control the game. Now, whether you win, that's a different thing, but at least having control of the game can be very, very beneficial and pretty easy if you have the right tools for it, quite frankly. While I do think that a lot of the stuff obviously works here, I think they just went too much into one direction. But overall, we still gave Synergy a B.
Yeah, it's more just that I think some of the stuff we were kind of harping on there is more. I think it's more like it's more about their lack of versatility. But as far as their synergy goes, yeah, it's definitely better than their versatility. They have if you're making a rain mode and you draft mostly stuff that wants rain up, at least that's that's some type of synergy. Obviously, I think the Garchomp and the Sylveon are really the only Pokemon on this team that don't really care about rain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I decent synergy there. Their threat level is their the highest grade that we gave them. Um, despite maybe their lack of versatility and some of the stuff on their draft not or the way that they drafted rather not really being that great in our eyes. They do have a lot of they do have some decent threat potential here. Like you mentioned, the Disquake combo with the Zapdos and the Garchomp is really nice. Those two work well together, whether one of them wants to max or not. Barrascuda is incredibly threatening. It's very offensive. If you have Rain Up, it's extremely hard to outspeed it. If they're running Swift Swim, if they're running the Propeller Tail, then it's extremely threatening because it can just get around your redirection and blow something up. It's a lot more of a threat to their opponent's threats instead of just being able to click follow me and suddenly the max geyser doesn't hit the thing that you need to be dealing your damage. Propeller tail and stalwart are pretty threatening abilities. It's hard to get around them. They reduce the amount of counterplay your opponents have. And I think even the Sylveon and the Scizor can be pretty serious threats as well. Scizor hitting the field with and just going for like a straight up choice band bullet punch or something like that, or if you want to use a Swords Dance first, I think it can do a lot of good stuff, especially covering for Garchomp hitting opposing fairy types with a big boosted steel attack. The Sylveon, I think we all know can be a really big threat. It's got a decent amount of versatility actually. You can run it really offensive, even with a choice specs or Life Orb if you want to Dynamax it or something. And I think its support set can be a little bit unassuming as well. If you're just expecting, if you're switching something in to just take a big Hyper Voice and suddenly the Sylveon yawns your Dynamax Pokemon, that's really really rough. So it can be threatening in a couple of different ways. The Politoed itself doesn't really provide a whole lot of threat. It's more just support. It's there for like Icy Wind, Helping Hand, Drizzle stuff. Maybe a Perish Song once in a while. The Delmise I think is an okay threat. I do like that it has essentially 3 stab moves. It's got a decent offensive stat. It's just that their Trick Room mode is not particularly threatening when your one Trick Room setter is a D tier and your one Trick Room sweeper is not really all that fast, or excuse me, not really all that slow. Like we say, the 30 base speed Pokemon are ones that we're kind of looking for as like the standard. So Delmise is a little bit awkward in that area, so not too threatening of a Trick Room mode. And then Pikachu can be kind of a threat if you slap a light ball on it and you just start blowing things up with 100% accurate thunders and rain, something like that. But it's a very high risk, high reward Pokemon, and if you're doing that, then you don't have a Focus Sash on it. You're probably not using it for redirection. It's going to get blown up really, really easily. 35, 40, and 50 on the defensive stats are, yeah, that's a light flick from a neutral attack will knock that thing out. So I think it's gonna be a little bit difficult for them to actually use that kind of set successfully, especially because there is no other redirection on the team, and because it's such a high risk type of strategy that you basically always want a Focus Sash on that Pikachu, unless your opponent is like just really really weak to discharge spam next to a Light Ball Pikachu. But I don't expect to see that come out very often. And if it does, I don't expect it to succeed very often. So a lot of good threats, some kind of threatening, maybe sort of underwhelming threats that might not work that well, but overall pretty good B+.
For versatility, we gave them a C basically. I feel like we're just kind of beating a dead horse at this point. Everything they have here, we more or less know what it's going to do here. Probably the one good thing that I don't want to say one, but they have a lot of really good Dynamax options in my opinion. Obviously the Zapdos, the Garchomp, Barraskewda, all prime, Pokemon to be able to Dynamax. Scizor, I feel that you want to probably take advantage of Technician more often than not, but I guess it could probably, if you want some Steel Spikes, stuff like that.
I
But
think I think the Scizor depends a little bit. It's in the later game when maybe your opponent's Dynamax is out of the way, yeah, the Bullet Punch is what you want to go for more often. But like I think if there's a really threatening Dynamax Pokemon on the other side of the field that Scizor could take care of with some of its other coverage moves, I can actually see Scizor Dynamaxing maybe once or twice if you can like really blow something up with a Max Bug or something like that. I could see Scizor actually being a decent Dynamax Pokemon.
yeah, but I think more often it's probably going to be the Garchomp because Garchomp kind of gets the
Yeah,
same coverage. Even gets Steel type stuff, base the same base attack, but a lot faster. So I think more often than not, you're probably going to see like the Zapdos, the Garchomp, or the Barraskewda. I think
yeah,
Barraskewda is a great Dynamax option, just in general, whether it's in rain or out of rain. I think just it could be really really powerful.
it's very risky though.
Yeah, because it's so frail. But yeah, overall, the I think the main issue is that we kind of know everything that's going to be happening from these particular Pokemon. Zapdos has a lot of versatility as far as it can be supportive or offensive, but and Politoed as well. Politoed, we've seen Benevici ran Scarf and Specs a couple of times on their Politoed, so.
Yeah,
It can definitely do some good damage if you put the right item on it. But Garchomp is more or less going to be a fast sweeper for the most part. Might throw out some bulldozes every now and then, but for the most part, it's you know what it's doing. Pikachu, you know what it's doing. Even Scizor, Sylveon, a lot of these Pokemon, you more or less know what's going on before, like right in team previews. So when they hit the field, you more or less have a game plan for them, and you can prep for it. So not a lot of versatility here, but there is in some of the spots that we do like, particularly in the S and A tier slots. Should be pretty good for them to have some versatile at least Dynamax options, but outside of that, we just don't see enough to justify anything more than a C. And overall, it ended up giving them a B minus. This draft honestly reminds me a little bit of the Talonflames last season. They were missing a lot of things, but they had good parts. And when you looked at their draft and how they got those parts, you're like, oh, the only good pick you had was a Dragapult in the first round. And then you just blew it. And they were like, all right, cool. We messed it up. We get it. But we're going to pick up a couple of good pieces and really round it out. And I'm not saying they drop any of these, but if you get rid of a Scizor or a Delmise and you try and make an upgrade at that particular spot, make something that's not so reliant on rain being up. Getting rid of the Pikachu and getting something like an Electabuzz could help a lot. Getting a more reliable Trick Room setter would be really nice, or a Trick Room sweeper. Little things like that could really put this team over the top because they have good pieces. We don't really agree too much on how they got those pieces.
yeah,
But the stuff is there. It's just I feel that they're too reliant on the one mode. So
right.
B minus I think is fair for right now, but after a few transactions, I think they can make this team work for sure. All right, let's go into the pros and cons. You want to handle the pros real quick?
I thought you were gonna take.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. So for the pros, obviously we were talking about it already. A solid Dragon Steel Fairy core. Your typical fantasy core. I think Delmise might be able to fit in there too because it gets that Steel Worker ability. So it does have stab Steel typing, but more or less, I think the Garchomp and the Sylveon they can work pretty well together. Have good spread moves, things like that, to where they can go past just regular redirection. Good base good base attack stats. Sylveon's obviously a special attacker, but base 110 is nothing to sneeze at, especially with stuff like Hyper Voice. It gets a little bit of a boost. You put things like Throat Spray on it. It can work well both defensively and offensively with stuff like how you mentioned it gets Yawn, Helping Hand, a lot of the other support moves in general. They have the potential to do weakness policy shenanigans with something like a quick attack into the Garchomp.
Oh yeah.
Scizor as well. Can do a lot of things. You're a huge fan of Scizor. A Swords Dance honestly can really pin a lot of teams if they're not ready for it. Just with a +2 bullet punch, just
Yeah.
kind of being able to snipe off as many things as possible, can really put them in a tough spot. Uh, so I think overall I do like the Fairy Steel Dragon core a lot because they paired that Garchomp with the Zapdos as well. It's not part of that core particularly, but I think that it helps the Garchomp out just in general. Having some type of speed control, a good switch in for an Earthquake, and doesn't have to really worry too much. Even though he does get like Stomping Tantrum and stuff like that now, I believe, right? Does he get
Yeah.
I don't think he gets high horsepower, but it does
No,
get
I don't.
Stomping
I don't think
Tantrum.
so. Yeah.
You can go both, with Earthquake or with just single target damage with Stomping Tantrum. So I think Fairy Steel Dragon Core that they have here is very very solid. And then their high tier Pokemon, obviously they made sure that they built it around the rain mode. So obviously you see the Zapdos, which benefits from rain by being able to launch off 100% thunders, 100% accurate hurricanes. Um, Pairing that with the Garchomp, the Zapdos and the Garchomp just really work well together. The Politoed and the Barraskewda really just work well together. The Sylveon complements and kind of fits in that Fairy Steel Dragon Core. They really made sure that these high tier Pokemon were going to be able to benefit each other in a lot of ways. I think that it feels so weird. I think that the main issue is that they probably rely too much on each other, in particular that rain mode. And I think that that's going to hinder them because without those particular Pokemon that are going to be supportive, once you can kind of separate them a little bit, they become a lot less threatening. Once you get rid of the Politoed and then you get rid of Rain, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now we don't have to deal with that Rain mode anymore. Now this makes it a lot easier. Get rid of the Barraskewda, and even then, it's like, cool. You have Rain up, but you have no way to abuse it. We're good with that. So, I think that they're almost a little bit too reliant on each other, but I think the fact that they were able to use their high tier picks to at least get a lot of good synergy out of those particular Pokemon is going to help them a lot. And then they have obviously a lot of different sweeps, even though they only have one weather mode. So we were talking about with the Scizor, they can get with a Swords Dance, especially something like Pikachu that's probably going to immediately die right when it just, but that's all it needs. All Scizor needs is just one chance to get Swords Dance up, and Scizor has good enough defenses to where it's gonna have to be like a Heat Wave or something. You're not gonna be able to get a strong Earthquake off and knock it out. You're not gonna be able to use some weird spread move that is going to really put it into danger of dying. And then it gets access to stuff like Roost too. So if you really want to just make it bulky and support it, it could get a Swords Dance, start roosting. I mean, I think pretty much all Scizor needs is like Bullet Punch anyway. You can throw other stuff on
For
there
the most
too.
part, yeah.
But
It's a little bit weaker now in a Dynamax format, but yeah, there's a lot of it adds to the hyper offensive nature of this team for sure. And I think actually a choice band set might be more fitting for this team a lot
Yeah.
of the time because they don't it's not going to be as easy for them to set things up.
The Swords Dancer you got to watch out for is Garchomp.
That too. That's probably a more dangerous Swords
Yeah.
Dance Pokemon because it's probably going to be a little bit easier for it to actually get that up and
Maybe a Force as a Dynamax Pokemon as well. Scizor can as
Yeah.
well too, but
yeah. I think the thing about the offense here is that if their opponents are not ready for what they're doing, there's a lot of potential to just really sweep through and not really take a lot of KOs on their own side in return. So I think
Yeah.
if their opponents aren't ready for some of this really hyper offensive stuff they have, we could see like a 4-0 or 5-0 win pretty easily.
I think the problem, I hate to just keep going over this, but is that they only have so many modes that they can hit you with at a time.
Right.
So if you make sure that you plan for those particular modes, you should and hypothetically be good sailing set for you.
Right. So which kind of leads into our cons. The first one being that this team is kind of over reliant on rain. That's a lot of that is why we gave them this C in versatility because that rain mode is one of the main things they're going for, and a lot of the stuff on this team really wants to abuse rain. So it's going to be, if you have a good way to get rid of rain, or even better, a way to set up your own weather that you can abuse in one way or another. This team's going to have a pretty hard time. It's just going to be a little bit rough for them because they don't really have a whole lot of other stuff. Their other modes are going to be more like, a Garchomp Zapdos mode, or using kind of like a Garchomp Scizor Sylveon kind of thing, just using the good synergy that those three have together to blow through teams, or and they don't really have a very good Trick Room mode. Again, like I know they seem a little bit they seem confident in the Duskull. I'm not, so I don't think that
Seems like Tom bait.
that too, and it's just it's just a discount Dusclops that's not going to be able to take the same hits at all. I don't know what the difference in their move pools are like, but even if Duskull gets most of the tools that Dusclops gets, I don't think it's good enough.
You get Trick Room up too, and Delmise is good, but I don't think it's what you want to put your entire Trick Room stock into.
Right. So it's more just that the team's kind of over reliant on rain. So if you're able to beat the rain mode pretty easily, I don't feel that they have a huge amount of other stuff that can really make up for that and pick up the slack where the rain mode kind of failed. But their main Swift Swim Sweeper is also a glass cannon. I mean, if you look at those defensive stats on the Barraskewda, 61, 60, and 50, even in its Dynamax form, you have to you can't really rely on it taking big hits. I've used Barraskewda a lot in draft, and it's tough to make it work. Half the time I'm afraid to Dynamax it because, well, more than half actually, I'm afraid to Dynamax it because it can just die so easily. But it's so if you can get a good hit off on the Barraskewda, especially if it's the Dynamax Pokemon, you can stop so much of their momentum right off the bat. Again, pretty limited Trick Room mode. We've hit on this a couple times. The Delmise being your only Trick Room sweeper is okay. I mean, Scizor and Sylveon can do okay in Trick Room with their low-ish speed stats, but having a speed stat in the 60s is just kind of awkward whether you're in or out of Trick Room. Especially because a lot of other teams, they have something that's going to be slower than that they want to be putting in Trick Room. And then the Duskull, I don't really consider a reliable Trick Room setter. And then of course there's the bit of anti-synergy between the Pikachu and the Zapdos, which might not be a problem if you really want to put Pikachu and Zapdos on the same side. Then you're not going to be hitting into your own Lightning Rod. But it's just kind of a little unfortunate that your only S tier and your only redirector can't really be put next to each other unless you're going to sacrifice your redirector's better ability. So it's a little bit unfortunate to see. Would have really liked to see an Electabuzz or Electivire in that slot. So that should do it. Just got a couple of... usually we ask the team that we were interviewing a couple of questions to finish things off. So usually we ask what Pokemon are you most excited to use? In this case, Anthony, what Pokemon are you most excited to see from this draft?
Garchomp, probably.
Why Garchomp?
In particular, I think it's the most well-rounded Pokemon that they have here. Is probably not so reliant on the rain mode. Just in general, just a good Pokemon that with little support can probably do some decent damage. If they can get this Garchomp and make it a threat to where it is like the main force that they have and the main form of offense that they have, I think they'll be in a good spot. But if they rely too hard on this Barraskewda, this Zapdos, this Politoed, I think they're going to have a little bit of a tough time. But so I'm excited to see Garchomp. I think if they can get the Garchomp going and it's a big part of their offense, I think they can do all right. But that times 4 weakness is it's going to be tough.
I'm gonna say Barraskewda personally. It's a Pokemon that I've got experience with in draft. It's a little bit underrated and overlooked, I think. I I especially want to see them make use of this thing outside of rain, because it can do that. Obviously, it wants to be in rain, even if it doesn't have Swift Swim. You're going to get really good damage off of those water attacks, whether you're using Liquidation or Max Geyser. But I whenever I've used it, I don't actually use it in rain. I have had rain on the same team at the same time, but it just it feels awkward, I think, because trying to put Politoed next to the Barraskewda just means that your Barraskewda is it's so vulnerable, because it doesn't really have any decent double target moves, so it's not going to be able to kill both of your opponent's Pokemon at the same time. So when it's killing one thing, the other thing can just sort of ignore the Politoed because it's not much of a threat, and they can just blow up the frail Barraskewda. But if they manage to use it correctly with some kind of a big threat next to it to help with its offense, or they put redirection next to it, or something like that, I think it can do a lot of good stuff even outside of rain. Most of what I use it for is just a really fast offensive water type with a lot of good coverage, because it does get a lot of really good coverage. It's got like close combat and poison jab, crunch, drill run, psychic fangs, bounce. It's got a lot of good stuff.
All right, next one is, what do you think is an underrated Pokemon that they have on their team?
Underrated, I mean, might be kind of a cop out, but I think Barraskewda, mostly just because, like, I don't feel like nobody's picked it in the last 2 seasons, right? I don't think I've ever heard anybody really talk much about it, but I'm surprised it's gone 2 seasons without being drafted. I'm not, like I said, I'm not super confident with it being used as the main trick or Swift Swim sweeper here. I think it's a little bit vulnerable when you're really working hard to put rain next to it. But outside of rain, or it can even set up its own rain if you're maxing
Matt, we get it.
Outside of rain,
like Barraskewda.
It's cool, man.
You're gonna talk about Barraskewda twice.
Yeah,
You're gonna go on another rant about Barraskewda.
I know, it's good, dude. I'm not convinced it's great here, but it's good.
All right, ready for this?
No.
Dhelmise. Next question.
Why Dhelmise?
Dhelmise because I think that it is actually a good Trick Room answer that they might be able to have here. I think Poltergeist might be decent, that they have the Steel Worker ability to kind of give them an extra typing. They might be able to do okay with things with Dhelmise. And I think it's a little bit of an underrated Pokemon just in general. If they can get the Trick Room mode up in the mid to late game, Dhelmise can do some work. Not convinced that it's going to carry the load for them as far as in the front, but I think that if they are able to control the game and bring it in the mid to late game and get it supported properly, I think it could do some good work.
Yeah, it's one of those Pokemon that's carrying a really heavy load because it's not it's really the only big offensive Trick Room sweeper. You know, if you had more offense on your Trick Room setter as well, and maybe Dhelmise was a little bit slower, the burden it's carrying would not be quite so large, and I think it'd be it would be better at doing its job.
So what do you think expectations for the guys for the season?
It's hard to tell. I think if they're not able to utilize the kind of creativity that they'll need, and the kind of if they go pretty standard most of the time on a lot of these mons, I don't expect too much because it's going to be pretty easy to prep for. But I think if they make some of these mons break out from their usual roles, or even better, I think make some good transactions to break out of the limited modes that they have currently, then I can see them doing well, possibly making playoffs.
Yeah, they're gonna need to be very creative, I think. I think you look at the Sadistic Seniors last season. They had the NDD Porygon Z, so everybody was like prepping hard for that, and for the longest time they were just like, "We're not bringing it. Yeah. We're not maxing it." And these guys need to do that. They need to be like, "We didn't even bring Rain on the bench." Yeah. and go out and win like that, and really make it so that way the rain is kind of on the back burner, and then later on during the season you can rely on it a little bit more because you've been able to pull off wins without relying on it so much.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things that we saw out of the seniors. That's why they were able to pick up a little bit more consistency towards the end of this season, because they started using the Porygon Z a little bit more and more and more, and not just as like a bluff Pokemon, because that's basically what we saw it for the first couple of weeks.
Right, and
like,
they still did well without using that the way you expect. So, I think that's a good comparison, because they had a lot of really big threats, but you kind of it was pretty top heavy, and you knew what to prep for, and they kind of they broke out of the mold that I think everybody had put them in, and were able to win with stuff that people weren't exactly hard prepping for. I mean, they Dynamaxed the Poliwrath against the Russians. Like, who was expecting that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's some solid advice. Between that and some kind of creativity, putting your big stuff on the bench once in a while, or using it in ways that your opponents don't expect, or getting some good transactions. I think those are some combination of those are going to be the way that they make playoffs if they're able to pull that off.
It's a good Pokemon on the team. So
yeah.
All right, I think that wraps it up. All right.
Yep. Should be it.
Wraps it up, Matt.
What?
We're done.
Oh yeah.
That wraps it up.
That wraps up all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have to. Well, we still have to battle on Saturday and do a stream on Sunday.
Yeah, but with this,
I know,
teams, and everybody crying, going, sliding into our DMs, going, I don't know, man. I think we deserve more than a B+.
I think a lot of teams. Well, maybe not a lot, but a few teams at least are probably a little bit more happy with their grades when they saw how we graded everybody else.
Yeah.
And
actually, a lot of the teams were good sports.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll give a big goodbye this time. Thanks to Dina, our executive producer, everybody in the mod team and the admin team, everybody in the league that was able to interview with us. I mean, yeah. Thanks, we appreciate it. It was a great time doing all this too. So
yeah, we're really happy to have gotten such a big majority of the teams on here as well to talk with us. So.
15 of 18?
Yeah.
15 of 18. So.
I mean, 16 if you count us.
Oh, 16, yeah.
Or, no, 15. 15 if you count us, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but that'll do it. We'll see you guys on Sunday night for our Week 1 Power Rankings stream.
Yeah, be fun. Be there.
Peace.